Welcome to Sandy Journeys. I'm Sandy, and this is Epic Patagonia. Last February, we decided to take a guided tour through one seed of the Chilean Patagonia. It wasn't easy, but it was a lot of fun. It started with a 2-hour drive from Chattanooga to Atlanta, where we took a 9-hour red eye to Santiago, Chile. We spent the day there and the night, and the next day took a flight that was 3.5 hours long to Punta Arenas, then a bus drive that was 3 hours long to Puerto Natales, where we again stayed the night. The next day, we finally made it into the park, Torres del Paine. That night, we stayed at Refugio Las Torres, and the next day took our very first day hike to see Las Torres. This was a pretty challenging hike, so it was a good thing we only had our day packs. But the view at the top was absolutely impressive, and I would say probably the most impressive sight that we saw the entire time. It was our first day there, so that's probably why we were so impressed as well, but I think it's a pretty iconic view, and here it is. Absolutely gorgeous. After a long day of hot hiking uphill, we were there in February and I expected it to be cool and I had long pants on and a long sleeve shirt and that was a bad idea. But nonetheless, I made it up to the top and we sat up here and ate lunch and enjoyed the breeze and just had a wonderful time. Downhill was a lot easier and we did stay the night again at the Refugio Las Torres. From there, we took our next hike to the next refugio, Refugio Los Cuernos. One of the many advantages of going on a guided tour is that the guides know the parks best. They know the best photo stops, the best places to stop and get a nice cool breeze, the best places to have lunch. And this is one of the suggested spots. Another great thing is the guides can tell you where to get water, which here in the park, pretty much anywhere, it is glacial fed, the best tasting water you can get, and no one in the group got sick. And they can also point out some good places for you to use an outside natural restroom with privacy. Just remember, leave nothing but footprints and take nothing but photos. So take a Ziploc bag and pick up your trash. Another advantage of having a guide is they know exactly how far you have left to go. That first day, we hiked 12.5 miles round trip, and it was nice to know, are we there yet? We're almost there yet. Especially since we were staying in refugios every night where there was a warm meal and hot shower waiting for us. By the way, when you book this, you have the choice of picking either a camping type of tent guided tour where you stay in campsites or staying in the refugio itself, which is a building with electricity, with running water, with hot water. The electricity does get shut off at some part of the night. There is no air conditioning, and oftentimes the mattresses, which are in bunk beds, and they are multi-person rooms, don't have sheets on them. So you have to bring a sleeping bag and sleep on the bed. But every refugio is different, and some refugios did have their own sheets and pillows and things. So some were really, really nice, some were a little bit more rustic, but all of them were better than tents. The hike from Refugio Las Torres to Refugio Los Cuernos was only 7 miles, but it was not the Patagonia flat 7 miles, which we later had, but steep hills and steep downs, so it was challenging. And Refugio Los Cuernos ended up being one of my favorite refugios. I don't know if it was because it was after 2 challenging days or because it just happened to be a quaint little refugio, but it was. The second day of hiking, as well as the third day of hiking, and from pretty much from there on out, we did have to carry our full packs. And that included anything that you wanted to bring with you, any medicines you wanted to bring with you, your sleeping bag, towel, toiletries. So probably a really good idea. If you're traveling through one seed or any kind of group like that, they will give you a list of things to pack, and I would pretty much stick to the list. Everybody's gonna stink. Everybody's gonna be wearing the same clothes over and over. It's okay. Just embrace the stink. And pack light because you're going to regret it later. One of the things that I would definitely recommend is not bringing snacks on a one seed tour. I don't know about any other tours, but one seed feeds you really good. Let me tell you, I get hungry every 4 hours and I thought there's no way I need to bring protein bars and bring protein powder to make my own protein shakes. No, you don't need it. they give you these huge sandwich packs, which, by the way, you also have to carry. They give it to you at the morning, and then you carry it in your bag for your lunch. And I never ate all of it. I always had stuff left over. The time we were there was really hot and stuff was melting. And anyway, point being, you have plenty of food. And then you have a really big breakfast and a really big dinner, which is sit down at the refugios. And then you have a huge lunch that you carry with you. And I never ate all of it and always had stuff left over. So I never went hungry. You do not need to carry food. You do need to carry water, and it's okay to drink the water there. I brought a filter. I didn't use it. One of the things I do recommend you bring is a lot of Aleve or Advil or whatever your preference of non-steroidal anti-inflammatory is, because you're going to need that a lot. And don't just bring enough for you, because chances are there's someone in your group who forgot to bring some and you may want to share. I was not bright enough to bring more than for myself, and I had to share with my good friend and my boyfriend that I traveled with on this trip. And I didn't have enough for my midday, so I took it at night to be able to sleep, and I took it in the morning to be able to get going. And as you know, with these things, they don't last that long. Often they have to be dosed 3 times a day, depending on which one you bought, and mine did. And so in the middle of the day, I was miserable. My knees hurt. And I did go out and train for this trek. I took my pack and I went hiking around where I live in Tennessee. The problem is that you just don't have the steep highs and the steep lows that you have in Patagonia in Tennessee. And so my poor knees were just not ready for it. My IT bands were barking for weeks after this trip. But they are fine now, and it was worth it. But trust me, just bring your non-steroidal anti-inflammatory. You don't want to forget that. Another thing I would recommend bringing is duct tape. I know it sounds weird, but it serves multiple purposes. Shoes broke, backpacks broke, things happened, and duct tape was there to save the day. So I thought my boyfriend was crazy for bringing some, but it definitely got used, and we actually ran out sooner than we needed to be and had to borrow somebody else's duct tape. So there you go. And don't make the mistake that my boyfriend made and bring 20-year-old boots, because they will fall apart on you in the middle of this trek and they will give you blisters. I would do your research ahead of time, get some really good boots that are either no less than a year or 2 old and are broken in, or you can buy brand new ones, but make sure you break them in before you go, which is what I did. And I was the only one out of the group that didn't get blisters. But let's get back to hiking for a moment. The next day, which is day number 3 of hiking, we hiked 9 miles from Refugio Los Cuernos to Refugio Paine Grande. This is probably the largest refugio we stayed at within the W circuit. It is where the ferries take you to the main entrance. It has a huge restaurant, post office, a little store. So it definitely had some nice things about it, but I wasn't my favorite because it was so large. The next refugio is probably my second favorite. That was Refugio Grey. That was a 7-mile hike from Refugio Paine Grande. And this is why. This is the Grey Lake, and this is one of the things that you have access to from Refugio Grey. You can do different things that day once you arrive and the day after, which include taking a hike on some fairly perilous suspension bridges along the glacier, going on the glacier itself and doing a glacial hike, as you see the group doing here, which gives you some beautiful views of this wet glacier, including a waterfall, as you see there, and some glacial water, as you see here. But if that's not your thing, you can do a kayak tour of the glacier. And as I mentioned, you can do an additional hike with the suspension bridges. We did have people in our group who did all 3 things. I don't recommend that. It was a lot for one day. But doing, 2 things is definitely a achievable goal for one day. But if you have a little bit more time at Refugio Grey, which I definitely recommend, you can see a lot more in a few days there. We stayed 2 nights there, and the second night was probably our saddest because it was our very last day staying in the park itself. That was a day where we took an approximately 7 mile hike from Refugio Gray back to Refugio Paine Grande, and then took a ferry back to the entrance of the park, where we later took a bus to Puerto Natales and then spend the night again. The time we were there, it was kind of an interesting time. What you're seeing here in this video is supposedly never done before, but the glacier was melting at a very fast rate because it was much hotter that week than it was supposed to be. And so the kayaks generally don't come back in this area, or if they do cross, they have to carry the kayak through this area because it's not deep enough. But you see me there crossing this area with my kayak, which is a really cool thing to say that I was maybe one of the first people to ever do this, but kind of sad that it was so hot there and unusually hot for the entire week that the glaciers were melting. And this was a cool thing that happened from the glaciers melting. Of course, you also see the big pieces of iceberg that have broken off the glacier. That's also a result of the glacier melting faster than it should. But there are a lot of glaciers in the park, and it caused a lot of flooding. And there was areas of the park where they had to shut down certain hikes. The W circuit is part of the I guess the legs that make the W are, I guess, optional hikes. You don't have to do them if you're doing the full circuit, but they do offer some great views. For example, Las Torres is one of those legs. The French Valley is one of those legs. And so some of those ended up having to be closed due to flooding, because at times you're having to cross rivers, and those rivers were flooded from the large amount of glacier water that there was. And then the main entrance to Puerto Natales was also flooded. And when we left, when our ferry finally took us to where we needed to go, we had to wait for a while because there were people being shuttled in a truck that was large enough to traverse the flooded road. So there you go. Global warming is a thing. Do your thing to stop it. I hope that you enjoyed this video, that it was helpful, that you found the W circuit to be amazing, and will soon be traveling to Patagonia yourself. I do recommend One Seed. They were a great company. Safe travels, and see you next time.